Hello and welcome to the CFB edition of the Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and joined by my co-pilot, co-host Jake Kuchek. We are officially into bowl season. Crazy as that sounds, with bowl season, there is a lot of tilting and frustrations and glee involved, all rolled into one, all those emotions, which kind of just really sums up DFS and sports betting in general. What we're going to do this week is cover the 5 games. There's actually a couple of earlier games in the day, but we're going to cover the 5-game set that is on DraftKings and FanDuel. And when we have our articles and written content and shows for the bowl stuff, I think it'll be pertinent for us to obviously do our game by game thing, but we'll also go through and highlight and start with any key injuries or guys who have opted out. The transfer portal has gone like wild. This happened in college basketball during the offseason. Figured it would for college football, and it absolutely has. Just today, we heard of Curtis Rourke transferring to Indiana. It's going to be a lot of really intriguing moves to talk about, but it's going to impact bowl season a lot. It's going to be a really big edge for knowing ahead of time who's going to be out, reading, message boards, beat reports, all that. And even having all that information at our disposal, there'll still be some player that nobody talked about that scores 3 or 4 touchdowns. So a lot of craziness to go on. Jake, I'm happy to be on the show again with you here today. You had a chance to look at the bowl season and overall this year. How do you feel about transfer season and how it's impacting the bowls and what's to come?
Yeah, man. I'll say this. I do not envy people that have to put up lines and totals for these games. I mean, especially if you're a sports book and you have to be kind of dynamic about it, keeping track of who's opting out at the last minute, who might play nominally, might play a series or two and isn't going to be impactful for the rest of the game. Like there's all kinds of stuff that you have to keep your eyes out for, and we'll get into all that. But yeah, it is chaos. But I always like to say that I thrive in chaos, and so I welcome the challenge that bowl season brings us.
Most definitely. So we'll hop right in here. We're going to do our thing game by game, try to give maybe like some semblance of a core if possible and any applicable prize picks or betting opportunities that we see. We'll start with this first game on the slate here. And then if we have time at the end, maybe we'll circle back around and give a couple of thoughts on the earlier games. Jacksonville State versus Louisiana. This is the New Orleans Bowl. It's a total of 59, which happens to be one of the highest totals on this slate. It's kind of a weird slate. They are Jacksonville State is 2.5-point favorites, but I think it's pretty close to a pick 'em. This is one of the few bowl games that doesn't have, at least what I saw, huge opt-outs, portal stuff. Like the kicker for Jacksonville State hit the portal, but I'm not sure that anyone else super relevant at this moment is going to be out. Perhaps you saw something and there's some other stuff in this game, but I'll have you start us off here.
Yeah. So it is an interesting one to have a Louisiana game be like a UL game be a higher total on the slate is a little bit weird. Like you wouldn't necessarily expect that. But I think that also has something to do with the fact that most of the talent from both teams is going to be retained, and these offenses should be in sync a little bit more than offenses that haven't played together all year with all of their pieces. One piece that probably should mention, even though it's not a skill player, the starting left tackle for the ULL is injured and won't be playing in the bowl. So maybe the quarterback won't have quite as much time to throw, and maybe we won't see as many runs to that side, that kind of thing. And then on Jacksonville State side, there's a starting edge rusher and a starting cornerback that are also injured and won't be playing, or likely will not be playing due to injury. So it's kind of like, well, we've got an injury on the offensive side and then 2 injuries on the defensive side that absolutely counteract that offensive injury. So how do we really read that? Good news is that the skill players are pretty much all supposed to play, at least at Thursday night. That plenty can change between now and game time. The way that I'm probably going to start with exposure to this one is, a name that we saw a lot of, which is Zion Webb on our Tuesday and Wednesday slates early in the season. And unless unless we get news that he's not playing in this one, even though this is kind of a tougher defense, I I do like that price. He's at 7K. It's not an overwhelming price for a quarterback that has time and time again shown us the ability to get it done on the ground. He had his highest rushing total was 28 carries for 146 yards and a touchdown. Did have 7 rushing touchdowns on the season, and so that does have the well. He's not as much of a passer as you'd really hope for. He's kind of that single threat quarterback that we talk about sometimes, where it's mainly the rushing ability that you're focused on, and then if you get anything in the passing game, that's just kind of icing on the cake. But not a bad way to start at 7K. UL is kind of a tougher defense, but probably have not seen a ton in the way of mobile quarterbacks the way that Zion Webb is, and so with him being more of a rushing quarterback, definitely don't have to pair him with anyone. We have seen some flash games out of Perry Carter, so if there's a name that you want to force in there to absolutely have your pairing or stacking option, that would be the one to do it with. But I don't see that as a necessary thing. And then on the ULL side, traditionally more of a running team. What we've seen from them in the past, not necessarily going to be the case with Chandler Fields at the helm. They've been airing it out, as many as almost 40 times in 2 of the last 3 games. And Jacksonville State, definitely a defense that probably can be taken advantage of. But you're also paying up a little bit higher than for Zion Webb. So potentially an argument to be game stacking this one, with it being a higher total, and more importantly with known skilled players kind of throughout, and not having a lot of bogeys from that perspective. So Chandler Fields is an interesting play. Is going to be more of a traditional pocket passer, probably not going to have as much rushing upside there. And then we were really big in the on the back to the Jacksonville State side for the running game. We're really big on Malik Jackson most of the season. We also saw some Anwar Lewis at times. I would have to imagine if both are healthy and active for this one, which I anticipate they will be again at this time, it probably is going to be Malik Jackson, but you also see a lot of slippage with as much rushing as Zion Webb does. So that's the only downside there. There are probably other backs that I want to get to on this slate, but it's it's probably a medium kind of mediocre play, not one I'm forcing, also not a terrible one. If he is down in like the 5K range, I might be a little bit more excited about it. And then Jacob Kabodi on the ULL side, not a super high volume back, only saw more than 20 carries once this season. However, going up against a little bit softer of a defense, and he is only 5K. So there's an option there. And then I don't necessarily want to get to Anwar Lewis. We get absolutely no discount on him. And it's about all that I want from the running game pieces. Mentioned Perry Carter on the Jacksonville State side in the receiving game. Peter LeBlanc kind of feels like he's been at ULL forever. It's definitely a name we know from seeing them on slates in the past, and not a lot of consistency there for sure, but there's the opportunity for spike game, and maybe we see like a lot of times we see in rivalry games or in bowl games, there's the opportunity to break tendency a little bit, and if anyone is going to spike from the UOL side, there's a decent chance that it's going to be him. Also see some volume with Robert Williams and Jacob Bernard, but it's nothing that, stands out for the prices that you're paying. And so I would say, naked Zion Webb is probably my highest priority from this game, with, mixing and matching some receivers over running backs probably. But that's kind of my read on it.
Yeah, I agree. The price on Webb just way more advantageous than it is on Fields. Would be inclined to run him, and really outside of maybe some of the running game, like you mentioned, Jackson, who at 6'1", he's kind of just like almost a last man in type, not a priority. But if you ended up landing there, we know he's got upside, but the actual usage and the attempts may not be there because of there being a rushing quarterback. Only thing I'd add is in the receiving game, LeBlanc, of course, like you said, there's a little bit of a discount on Bernard at 4.8. They're all really wedged together. There's like 5 different receivers on this team that have 38 plus targets. So I do like a little bit of Bernard there, but it's not a line in the sand play by any means. All right, we will move on to the next game here, which is the Avocados from Mexico, Kier Bowl, had to add that. 6.5 point favorites are Appy State, a 43 total, so the lowest on the slate, which is kind of something we've come to expect from App State games, especially lately. Now, this is a game kind of the polar opposite of the one we just talked about in terms of there is transfer portal craziness across the board. Nate Noel, their RB1, is in the portal and out. That definitely helps to a degree because Appalachian State tends to run, 5 different running backs throughout. Not having him around kind of opens things up a little bit for a play like Kanye Roberts, although they did price him about 5.2, and his logs are pretty appealing. So people would likely notice something like that. We've seen in the past, Anderson Castle has a little bit of touchdown equity. He's in the mix there at 3.3K. So there's some different options that we can look at there. Also, the receiving game, Sutton and Deshaun Davis both hitting the transfer portal there. Appalachian State's wide receiver groups has been pretty putrid outside of kind of show favorite Caden Robinson, who I've hit on a couple of times at low rostership over the last month of the season. So really it doesn't affect a lot because those guys are the 3rd and 4th and they're way down the list in target priorities anyway, but that is at least a bump up for Robinson to a degree. On the side of Miami, they'll be without your guy Avion Smith, who does hit the transfer portal. Now the Red Hawks are 5-0 with Avion Smith, but it's really not. It's kind of a misnomer because he's not the greatest passer. He's more of just a scrambler, and a lot of those games was just won with their rushing ability and also playing a lot of weak MAC teams this year. The conference was pretty whatever the opposite of stellar would be. So not having him around means that they're going to have to turn to their QB3, which would be Henry Hessen. Solid name. Still no Brett Gabbert because he injured once again. Hessen only attempted 5 passes in his prior season. This will be his first bit of action for the season here in the bowl game. So that's pretty tough. We'll see what your take is there, but that's the main news to look at. Maybe Rashad Amos, who we have to look at here. I'll give my take in a second, but that's the primary guys opting out. How are you seeing this game develop?
Well, first, Miami, Ohio having 2 quarterbacks, named Smith and Hessen. There was a missed marketing opportunity,
right?
For gunslingers. Although Avion doesn't throw it all that much, but yeah, they screwed up that one. Rashad Amos, absolutely banger of a game against Toledo relative to like anyone else's offensive performance in that game. DeQuan Finn completely laid an egg. Petty Boone didn't get it done either. It was a pretty terrible performance by Toledo all the way around. Great performance by the Miami defense. They were like the only unit that showed up that whole game. Other than Amos. Amos looked really good. I don't know that he's going to do that same thing to an App State defense, and especially with a 3rd string quarterback that, like, if he didn't beat out Avion Smith, I'm not predicting big things for Hessen. We've been surprised in bowl season before, but that's probably not where I'm looking to have a surprise happen. And it also means, there's going to be a lot more stacked boxes for Amos than necessarily was against Toledo. Toledo had to worry about the scrambling. Hessen, I don't think, is going to have that same ability. I don't know. Maybe he is as good of a scramble as Savion Smith, but I wouldn't expect it. So where does that leave us with Amos? If he were still down in the low sixes or even in like the mid to high fives, I would be a little bit more intrigued. At the 6.5 price, it's, I'm trying to find a way to get up to a Taj Brooks. Like that's a high enough price that I'm trying to get there. I kind of see this as like a slow grinded out 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of game. And that doesn't lead itself to DFS glory. I do have a good amount of interest in Kanye Roberts. I do like the efficiency that he's had recently, and I like that, there is the opportunity to maybe get a little bit closer to 20 touches with Nate Noel out and them kind of wanting to turn the carries over. It would be also nice if like maybe a Mokel Haywood didn't play for some reason in this game and consolidate the RB room even further. But it is, 5-2 for what should be the man on a defense that they should be able to run on Miami, Ohio. I like that play a lot. I'm having a hard time getting to Aguilar. Just that 8,400 price is quite a bit. And not to say that we can't use the quarterback running back duo. We talk about that a good amount. I just would rather pick one of the two in this particular game because it is a lower total. And I don't see it being a super explosive game. But like you said, there are talented receivers on the App State side in particular. And not to say that there aren't talented receivers on the Miami, Ohio side. Reality is we have no idea if there's any talent in the Miami, Ohio receiving room because they haven't had a quarterback and won't have a quarterback in this game in all likelihood that, has the ability and talent to get them the ball. So if you want to go bargain shopping in the Miami, Ohio receiver room, I guess Laverdane is like the potential explosive guy. And he hopefully is maybe all the way healthy. And then, we've seen some flash at times from Javon Tracy, but like we're really grasping at straws. So I would say, Caden Robinson is probably the most solid receiver play. At 5'6", in a game like this, I probably only am playing Caden Robinson if I'm also playing Aguilar. But I mainly want to focus on Kanye Roberts. I think that's my priority from this one.
Yeah, and just like I have a feeling we're going to get trolled. That's why I'd mentioned like Anderson Castle hadn't started playing until week 10 to where he actually got any kind of carries at all. A minimum of 6 carries in the last 3 games, 8 for 47 in their conference title game. Somebody who you're making multiple lineups at 3-3, I think will certainly get touches. I do like him a little bit more than Haywood, but I think you're right. This is the Roberts game. And remember, usually in bowl games, App State running backs have a affinity for breaking the slate. So certainly an area that we're going to want to focus in on. And I would completely agree. I still like Aguilar to a degree as well. The quarterbacks on this slate are there's some decent ones, but I think he's certainly in the mix with that.
Was it Darrington Evans that started that trend of like the ridiculous bowl game performance?
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because and then God, what is like 2020 maybe? Of course I got to go back and look now. My brain's so fried. That one dude that had Cameron Peoples. I was like, I know.
Cameron Peoples was next in line. I know. I remember that one. I was trying to remember who was before that. I think it was.
I think, yeah, Evans had the big one, and then people's like just racked with 5, and people were like, "Oh my god!" And then he just kind of fell off. But that's coming. Somebody from this team's you got to do it. Theoretically, should be Kanye, but Anderson Castle I think is in the mix. As far as Miami, Ohio goes, yeah, the wide receivers, it's been tough all year. There's been times where we've seen Gage Larvidan have some pretty decent performances despite the poor quarterback play. And Miles Marshall, we know, has talent, but I don't think we can use any of these guys. 4-9 is probably not cheap enough to even really look at him anyways. All right, we'll move on to the next game here, which is going to be New Mexico State versus Fresno State in the New Mexico Bowl. New Mexico State 3.5-point favorites. It's a 51 total. Looking at this one, New Mexico State without Tyre Brooks, he played 11 snaps, so nobody really relevant there, and a tight end who barely played into the transfer portal. For Fresno State, no Logan Fife, and no other real opportunities or as of right now, skill position guys that I've seen have opted out for the transfer portal. And I check the portal a lot, like every second of every day that I can. So I haven't seen anything there. Looking at this game, this is definitely one that I want to get exposure to. Mikey Keene has been fantastic. Obviously 8.2K is a big price, but the running game is really where we want to look here with Malik Sherrod, who has been just a really hard-nosed running back all season long. Early in the season, Elijah Gilliam had some pretty decent games, but as soon as Sherrod got fully healthy and just seized control of the job, he never really gave it back. And he's rattled off big performance after big performance without getting like 25 to 30 carries. He's doing all of this on, a very efficient 12 to 15 carries. The game against SDSU, 140 yards on 15 totes, had 5 receptions, just heavily involved at 6'8". The production level should be pretty much at 8K or higher, and he's not. So I would expect some pretty high ownership on a player like that. And then the receivers for Fresno State, there are a good amount of fantasy viability here with Mikey Keene. The target share this year has shaken out the following: Eric Brooks, 90 targets, Jalen Moss, 75, Mac Delena, 67, and Jalen Gill, 59. And this Fresno State team has been a squad that we've had a lot on the later slates, the late night where a lot of people maybe not have had the opportunity to get to know this team very well. With these receivers, it's important to note that I rarely, or what I adopted strategy-wise, was paying for the most expensive receiver on Fresno, because even though Brooks leads in targets like that, a lot of times he was not the leading receiver, and we'd see a game like Mac Delena, pop off for 6 for 120 and a touchdown. Jalen Gill has really been kind of my go-to, but lately he's fallen off, and it's really just been the Malik Sherrod show. So it's kind of tough to really get behind any of the receivers here with your main build, but there is going to be, I believe, some touchdowns in this game from the passing game, looking at the way that this should shake out. So I do like some GPP looks with a guy like Delena, who sits there at 5.2, or perhaps even down to the player 5th in targets, Trey Watson, who has seen an uptick the last few games heading into the bowl season. New Mexico State side, you have the dual threat extraordinaire, Diego Pavia. They priced him up at 8.6, which is a lot higher than he normally is. I think he got to 9K on some of the singular slates there, like the 2 or 3 game slates. I don't think he ever was his price when he was on a full game. Kind of tough to really, I guess, get behind, but he's going to have that rushing upside, almost 900 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns on the ground, 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, pretty high touchdown to interception ratio. I don't think people realize just how effective he's been as an actual passer. Completion percentage well over 61% as well. So Pavia, if you do pay up for a quarterback there at 8.6, he's definitely a guy who is able to take advantage, is going to have a lot of usage as well. Not somebody that you need to worry about pairing up with one of the receivers. I know we get that question all the time, like, do I run him naked? Could I run him with the receiver? He does have some talented receivers, guys like Bellamy, Jonathan Brady, and this guy that I thought was going to be really big this year, Cordell David, but didn't end up being all that great. But still some pretty talented guys in this receiver room. The running back situation for New Mexico State is dreadful. Star Thomas, they won't quite give up on him just yet, but he's been absolutely ineffective for most of the season. There's been times where our guy, Monte Watkins, was able to take advantage of those poor performances and kind of blitz out or score a long touchdown or put together a pretty solid performance. But unfortunately, he hasn't been able to get the workload, and I suspect it's because of the type of running style that he runs when you watch New Mexico State. He doesn't take hits all that well. And Jamani Jones was a guy that they ended up trying to give a little bit more work to in week 13. But what's ending up happening with this New Mexico State team is it's a triple-headed monster, and sometimes 4 different running backs getting anywhere from 5 to 12 carries. Again, I didn't see looking through that any of them have opted out yet. So really when I'm looking at New Mexico State, it's Pavia and probably nothing else. But I do feel like I want exposure to this game in some form or fashion because I have a feeling it might be higher scoring than maybe people suspect. How are you reading this one?
Yeah, so that is correct with Pavia. I guess the only other thing to mention, maybe you got it already about Trent Hudson to the portal. So he was the star of their conference championship game, 7-1-12-2, and won't be available in this one. So he is min price, and it does say that in his note, but maybe just we'll touch on that so nobody rosters Trent Hudson on accident. So probably does open up some more for Brady, and at 5-1, that's kind of a tall ask for me. I would kind of just run Pavia. And then on the Fresno State side, I mean, yeah, all Malik Sherrod all the time. New Mexico State gave up like almost 400 rushing yards to Liberty in the conference championship game. And so Malik Sherrod with more carry share, like those were 400 very spread out yards for Liberty, and I feel like Malik Sherrod's going to get the lion's share of the carries and the touches in this one. So he should run absolutely wild. That's a 202 game kind of written all over it. So love him both from the DFS and PrizePicks and props perspective. Do feel it is going to be a very big Malik Sherrod day. Rushing yards at only 87.5 on PrizePicks. I'm going to just throw that out right now. You should take the over on that. So yeah, man, just pretty much Pavia and Sherrod. If you want to throw Brady into the Pavia lineups, that is an option. Again, not a forced thing. It's kind of like with Zion Webb. Like, if it fits what else you're trying to do, it's definitely okay, but it is not a must. And yeah, I'm not inclined to try to pick a Fresno State receiver. If I am doing that, I'm probably going down to Mac DeLata. Just the cost savings on there make him appealing, but I am prioritizing Sherrod over trying to pick that correctly.
All right, moving on to the LA Bowl between UCLA and Boise State. Now, the Bruins are 4-point favorites. It's a 48.5 total. There has been a numerous amount of transfers for both teams. Taylon Green, the dual threat quarterback for Boise State, has opted to, as of this moment, transfer to Arkansas. Will not be available. Eric McAllister, who had decided to transfer a month and a half ago and has been away from the team, that's obviously off the table. And then you look at UCLA, my man Dante Moore, who is still super raw, entering the transfer portal with rumors about numerous destinations for him in the Michigan area and other. Keegan Jones, who DraftKings has listed as a wide receiver, but he did a little bit of both running back and wide receiver. He's in the portal. Cam Brown, one of their other high snap receivers, is in the transfer portal, and then a tight end by the name of Carson Ryan as well, and numerous safeties and edge players heading to the NFL draft. So UCLA is going to be without a ton of their players. So you lead us off on this one. That's the main guys I saw in the portal and or leaving for the draft.
Yeah. So the question marks are abundant in this one. I guess starting at quarterback for UCLA, sounds like it is going to be Ethan Garbers. It's not for sure. There's a lot of hedging to that. Colin Schlee also looks to be available. Who knows? We might see both of them. They've done that too. And so I'm probably not in on either of those two, but what it does mean is there, may be some stability to the passing game in a way that, there hadn't been with Dante Moore when they were trying him out, and that didn't really succeed the way they were looking for it to. So what that has meant, and with an even more condensed number of bodies in the passing game, a 5'5" Logan Loya is extremely attractive on this slate. Nine catches in each of the last two games. Had the touchdown against Cal, had another one against ASU, 5 on the season, and not having as many bodies to compete for targets with. No Cam Brown, no Keith Jones. And potentially, some stability at quarterback. I really like that 5'5". Yes, J. Michael Servant is going to be in there. And there's some other bodies that will attract some targets, certainly. But I think Logan Loya is very much the priority on the UCLA side in the passing game. Even if you aren't going to be using a UCLA quarterback, someone will be playing quarterback. And so, I think Logan Loya is definitely an option. There is the potential for Carson Steele to miss, not because of transferring, but because of health, or maybe not health, but at least not practicing. So if Carson Steele continues to not practice, and, ends up not playing, TJ Harden at 55 is also extremely viable. I think this Boise defense can get eaten up pretty well, especially going up against probably what is a more imposing offensive line than they would typically go up against. I think TJ Harden can have some success there, and if he's the only guy at 5'5", getting 15, 18 touches, in what should be in a pretty efficient manner should work out pretty well. On the Boise State side, that's where it gets really interesting because both running backs are playing. Janty's coming back. Holani,
I'm shocked about that, though. I thought he was for sure going to transfer.
Yeah, and Holani's back for his 12th year. Look, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there in terms of how that shakes out. And they also have, is it decided that they're going to go with Tiller? Like all the tea leaves have been kind of leaning towards Tiller at quarterback for Boise State.
That's what it sounds like. Like not even that they're confident either. It's like, well, this is the last guy we got pretty much.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like the Miami, Ohio situation where it's like, well, yes, this guy is like a body that's going to play quarterback. Realistically, we don't know what he's going to do. He doesn't have to face like the most difficult version of the UCLA defense, but this is still a probably pretty good UCLA defense, even if we're plugging in some depth pieces as opposed to like some NFL draft guys. The scheme is still there, and well, I guess they lost their defensive coordinator, so that isn't entirely true, but the talent level is still there. I'm probably not confident enough in Tiller, even at 4,500, to use him. That's like a galaxy brain GPP move. If you do it, God bless you. That's an interesting way to go and opens up a lot, but I'm probably not getting there. But what it means for the running backs is they're gonna have the same problem that Rashad Amos is, which is it's gonna be 8-man boxes, right? And so as good as Hawanti and Ashton Johnson are, this is already a pretty tough UCLA defense, and they're going to be very much keyed on the run, without having to respect the pass a whole heck of a lot. So do we think that could lead to some dump offs and maybe, some missed tackles? That's possible. But in terms of the traditional running game, especially having to pay 8.5 for Jonty splitting carries against stacked boxes, that's not really the place that I want to go. I like the other side quite a bit more, especially if we get news that Carson Steele can't go. Then as far as the receivers go, if you want to try to trust a Boise receiver, we've had some luck with the Prince Trahan and Austin Bolt calls. Those have done well, but it's been like lightning in a bottle, one catch for 60 yards and a touchdown kind of thing. It's not overly sustainable. It's not like we're getting 8 targets for each of those guys every week. And now they're coming from a quarterback that we know nothing about. But if you wanted to go, super cheap, the Boise passing game, my goodness, you can be into the Boise passing game with a quarterback and 2 receiver stack and be less than 10 grand all in somehow. So maybe not less than 10, less than 11. But yeah, that's a very, very GPP only way to attack this. So I think Logan Loya and Harden, if Carson Steele gets ruled out, is the prioritization from this game.
Yeah, and I will say stranger things obviously have happened in bowl games. So if Boise State's passing game went nuts, it would be a little surprising, but probably not truly shocking. But the big thing here is Boise State has to go out and into the portal and get a quarterback that can throw the ball, because Bolt and Stratton are both really good young receivers that deserve a good passer. And Ashton, my God, you just look at what he averaged. His DK average, 32 DK points per game is just ridiculous. Clearly had some drop off once Hulani got healthy. Spending up that 8.5, I'd agree with you. I think that's a nice call, because I think people might just gravitate towards him because there's so much uncertainty and people know what they've gotten from him. It's just such a huge opportunity cost. And I still think he'll probably score. He may even rush for 100 yards, but it's just a matter of how much more over 20 fantasy points are you going to get. Halani's going to be there. I do think PPR wise, you had mentioned those dump offs. There's a chance for him to rack up, a bunch of 1 yard reception, 1 to 3 yard receptions and possibly break one. So there is that aspect to it, but it is a huge opportunity cost, like you said. Halani less about the receiving game and more of a plotter, but it's just kind of tough. And there was talk also, J. Michael Sturdivant, he's still technically weighing his options. He's been at the practices and he's going to play in this game, but he's still weighing if he wants to go in the draft, or if he wants to transfer again. So, if you buy into the whole, using this as a showcase game, there is a chance for him, and he's going to be low rostered. Sturdivant's been really bad after having a nice, season at Cal. Coming to UCLA, it's just been a complete disappointment. Wish he would have been more in that 3.5 range instead of 4 or 5, but I do think there's merit to maybe getting him in there in a GPP shot. But otherwise, yeah, Harden, he seems like the absolute real deal here in this spot. I really highly doubt we see Steele, but we'll see. All right, last game on the slate, Cal versus Texas Tech in the Independence Bowl. Texas Tech 3-point favorites, and this has been a game that two teams that we've seen a lot of this season, and we've really featured them in our content and our show a lot as well. Before I'll run down the list here, and then we'll go to you for the analysis. As of right now, for Texas Tech, these are the following names that are fantasy relevant in the portal. Tyler Shuck, who is going to be playing in his 7th straight year. Cameron Valdez, who is RB3. Miles Price, Duran Bradley, Luick Fongu, Namahaya Martinez, which is a myriad of receivers. Now, you remember this receiver room has 10 plus guys getting targets. There's 4 of them right there in the transfer portal, just gone. So that's a pretty big deal. On the possibility of Taj Brooks, who said he was going to be going into the NFL draft, is actually going to be coming back. So that was a change of heart that he just recently had, and that's a big deal for not only Texas Tech fans and their program, but also for you and I and everybody else in the DFS community that absolutely just loves this guy. He's amazing, over almost 1,500 yards combined this year. He's going to be a beast. Love what he brings. So I'm super happy about that. Baron Morton is obviously, coming back as well. He's finally going to be, it sounds like 100% healthy. So that's a big deal because he's seemingly been hurt like his entire life. And then on the Cal side, Ben Finley and Sam Jackson, two of their lesser tier quarterbacks that had some time this year, are both in the portal because they got pushed out by the base god Mendoza, and that is basically the main skill position guys. There are a couple of starting offensive linemen that I saw hitting the portal, and then several key linebackers for Cal, but Cal's defense was never really that great, so we don't necessarily have to worry about that anyways. This would be a game we want to target, I'm sure, on both sides, and your guy Mendoza especially, I'm sure is in your scope. So where are you going with this one?
Yeah, man. I like Cal a lot in this game. With that many guys leaving the portal, like it just overall, it feels like morale probably isn't where you want it to be. Going into a bowl game, and like that plays a factor. We've seen teams that are way better on paper not show up in bowl games because the right motivation's not there and morale's not there. Now the one exception to that is Taj Brooks. If Taj Brooks is coming back for another season and going up a Cal defense that was terrible to begin with and missing, its top two linebackers, and was going to be overmatched in the run game to begin with. Yeah, this is like, I don't know who's going to have a better game between Malik Sherrod and Taj Brooks, but they're both going to be excellent. And especially with that many receivers missing, I think it's going to be Jordan Brown and Coy Eakin are probably going to be the two starting outside receivers with Xavier White in the slot, and then Dre McRae mixing in too. All of those are, fairly decent, but kind of thin plays. I feel like I probably would have the most interest in Jordan Brown just because of price point and lack of familiarity. So leading to lack of ownership for a guy in a starting role. But really it's just going to be Taj Brooks for 12 yards, Taj Brooks for 20 yards, Taj Brooks for 45 yards and a touchdown is what's going to happen over and over again. And so, yes, they're going to mix in some passing to that as well, but it's going to be the Taj Brooks show. Very much in on him. And then on the Cal side, we've seen teams numbers up against Texas Tech all season. Texas Tech defense not very good. And a lot of the guys that are leaving and transferring are on offense. And not the leading tackler, but a leading defensive tackle, a top defensive tackle missed the game due to injury for Texas Tech, not alleviating what little pressure they might be able to put on Cal. So what does that mean for Cal? It's kind of a pick your poison thing there. Fernando Mendoza down at 6'2", man. I don't know how I get away from that. That's a phenomenal price for what he brings to the table. Has a little bit of that rushing upside that we love from quarterbacks. And then, Jaden Ott at 8'4" with probably nobody really, mixing in to take carries from it. It's probably going to be a pretty big Jaden Ott workload game. Both of those choices are correct. And I definitely don't mind having both options in that game. Maybe they hook up for a screen pass for 70 yards and a touchdown, and that would be, best case scenario. But I see both of them, especially because of the low price on Mendoza, being extremely viable, whether you play Brooks in the lineup or not. But I mean, it's kind of to the point where Brooks and Sherrod, at least for me, should make most lineups together. So it's a how much more of this game do you want besides Brooks? Not, do you get Brooks involved? Right. So it's Brooks plus. And then in the passing game for the Cal side, it's it's kind of that same thing. Mendoza's not as much of a rusher, so I would tend to have a pass catcher with him more than I would with a Zion Webb in particular. And Jeremiah Hunter probably is the most upside. We liked Taj Davis earlier in the year. He is no longer on the team, so no Taj Davis. Grizel has had 2 good games. And at 5.2, I don't know that we can take that risk for 2 good games. Injuries down at 4K is mildly interesting, but I'm probably mainly going to be focused on Jeremiah Hunter. Even at 6.1, I think that there's a good amount of explosiveness, especially if you're going to play Mendoza. Seven touchdowns on the year, 675 yards. The numbers don't jump off the page, but they didn't get Mendoza really rolling until later in the year, and that's kind of when we saw some explosive games out of Hunter, especially and including the game against UCLA. 8 catches for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that's ending on a pretty high note there. So I think you're going to see me end up with a good amount of Mendoza and Hunter stacks, but not afraid to mix Ott into those lineups as well.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it like, Harden, I think probably close to a must. If, even if Steele plays, I feel like this is a like bowl game dictating Harden explosion. But Sherrod, Harden, Brooks, and then, there's some 4 running back potential here with Ott. And I know it's an expensive price. And I like the idea that, people, obviously Mendoza is going to be hugely chalky. I can't envision he won't be. But not seeing much ownership on a smaller slate like this on Jaden Ott, and 20 plus touches is a guarantee, but we might see 20 legitimate carries, and then of course some targets too. And he's just only a few games removed from 36 totes against Stanford back in week 12. This is a Texas Tech defense that gave up 170 yards on the ground throughout the season. So,
and I feel like ownership wise, at that price point, there's going to be a lot more of it on Genty than on Ott, and I think that's the reverse of the way I'm thinking of those two. I'm way higher on Ott than I am on Genty.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we kind of like name wise and what he's done, people will just maybe click on Ashton Genty's name instead of kind of delving in a little bit more. And if I can find a way to get Ott in and maybe I do go the 4 running back route, might as well. I've been doing it a lot. I feel that's a pretty strong case to be made there. Running 2 running backs in the same game from the opposite ends is something that we've done a lot and been successful with at the collegiate level. And his primary backup, Isaiah Mfanze, is currently day to day, but it sounds like he's trending towards being very limited. We'll see what happens there. And yeah, Dodge Davis, man, like he was hot to begin the season. And once they kind of made that switch, it was like he had very little chemistry. And you mentioned Hunter, but we saw Tron Grizel. He had a few spike games there to end the season, and his targets, there was 3 of his last 5 games. He hit 9 targets in 3 of those 5 performances. So at 5.2, he's kind of interesting too, depending on if you do pay up supremely at running back and need a little bit of a cheaper option. And Jack Endries, who's there at 4K, he also saw some more spikes in targets over the last 3 games of the season. So a little bit there. Texas Tech with all those receivers out, might there be somebody? This is a GPP area, but I think Coy Eakin is the guy at 5K there that we'd most want to look at. He's been a bit of a PPR guy. He's been super cheap and has pretty much worked out at the prices that he's been. So he's the one that I would most look at. I still want to say, like, we got to get this before the season ends. This is it. This is the last chance for Dre McCray to have that huge game that he used to have all the time and when he was at Austin P. So he's there at 3.5 as well, but at any GPP looks with the Texas Tech side there getting into the passing game, because Cal's defense has been horrific throughout, against the pass and the run. So I do think there'll be a connection here for one of these receivers, possibly more. But it's definitely, even with 4 of their rotation gone, they still have a stable of receivers that will pop their head up and will tilt you to be certain. But as usual, it's going to be a slate where I'm looking to pay down at receiver wherever possible. Do like the Hunter call at 6.1, and if I can get him in there, I certainly will. But for me, I think I'm trying to get Ott instead, which leads us to with the news that we have at our fingertips now, what kind of group 2-3 players are you looking to core? I know you kind of mentioned the running backs who you're locking in, but what is your actual core looking like?
Yeah. So I guess we'll stick to kind of the same typical format of a quarterback, running back, and receiver. So I'm going to go Mendoza quarterback, Taj Brooks running back, and then Logan Loya at receiver are going to be my core as of right now.
Love it. I'm gonna mirror the Mendoza call because I am leaning towards 4 running backs as it stands right now, assuming Carson Steele is out. Do like, of course, Webb, who you mentioned at 7K, makes a lot of sense. But looking at the group of quarterbacks, and I like Pavia too. But aside of maybe a few shares of Mikey Keene, I just feel like Mendoza's got to be the highest owned quarterback and just makes way too much sense. Core running back for me, we'll have Sherrard, but I don't know. I think Jay Knott's got to be in there. So I'm taking the quarterback and the running back from the same team there. And then at receiver, looking to go cheap where possible. But I am looking at taking 3 Cal in the core. I know it's a full stack, Tron Grizel at 5.2. I just don't think with the lineup that I'm having in mind, I'll be able to get to Hunter. So taking a little bit of a discount there for me on Grizel, who's seen a nice connection with Mendoza and just kind of pushed Davis out the door. All right. So there is one game before. Let me just pull up the odds here. The Ohio versus Georgia Southern. Now, I just mentioned that Mr. Rourke transferred over to Indiana. So that Georgia Southern line right now is 3.5 point spread, 48.5 total. Gotta like the betting side there for Georgia Southern. They have been a fun offense that passes a ton. Without Curtis Rourke, there is no O'Shawn Ellison, who's hitting the transfer portal for Ohio. I just saw that Sia Bangura also hitting the portal. Tyler Walton and Miles Cross. So that line of only 3.5 should probably be not right. So I'm looking heavily at the Georgia Southern side there. Jalen White, who is their big time stud, his status is up in the air, which I guess could be a reason for that line staying close. But even it wouldn't matter to me what they are rolling out there with all those guys missing from Ohio. That just seems like a really premium betting spot there for Georgia Southern. All right, let's move over to PrizePicks. What are some of those that are sticking out to you? It looks like we've got a myriad of intriguing options here. You start us out.
Yeah, so I touched on it before. Malik Sherrod over 87.5 rushing yards. That's like 100 yards too low. I just think he's going to go absolutely bonkers in this one. And so that's where I would be starting. It is interesting. They have TJ Harden projected for 82.5. So that would lead me to believe that it is fairly clear, at least to PrizePicks, that and anybody else that has him or has his prop that high, that Carson Steele will not be a factor or not be much of one if he does play. So that may affect the DFS perspective a little bit too if we get confirmation, even indirectly, that it's going to be the TJ Harden show. So that is an interesting one too, if that plays out, because I think if he is the guy, 82.5 is pretty a pretty low number for him to get to, and the same as Jonte, by the way. So pretty big price discrepancy DFS wise, and the same projection in terms of raw rushing yards. Into other options, Taj Brooks over 21.5 fantasy points. I think he will be a priority option when they're near the goal line. So and he'll have no shortage of room to run. So I think there's a myriad ways he can get there. And then we'll go to the trusty receptions tab, and I'm going to throw Tron Grizel over 3.5. And then also Jonathan Brady over 3 receptions are ones that I like. That's what I got for right now. Not a ton on there yet.
Yeah. One of the I like that Grizel receptions call too. But Ashton Genty's receptions are at 2.5. And if that plays out the way we kind of talked about, them having to lean on kind of short dump off type passes or just 1 to 3 yard plays, I do think Ashton could have like 5+ receptions. So I do like his. While I don't necessarily want him in DFS because I think his rushing yardage might suffer, I do think he clears 2.5 receptions. So that is one that I am angling towards. Looking at the Georgia Southern game versus Ohio's defense was pretty solid this year against the pass. But there's just so much gone from their team, and I really question them even trying. Plus, their cornerbacks coach, I believe, left the program or was let go. Derwin Burgess, who had been super productive this year, he's got a receiving total of 55.5. I am taking that over 55.5. Very early game, but this Georgia Southern offense has been very fun throughout the season, so I'm going there. Jaden Ott, over 16.5 receiving yards. I think he's going to be active in both aspects there for receiving and rushing. And he does have a combo prop of 126.5, which I like the over there. I think he might have those rushing yards alone over 120, but he's definitely going to be in the mix for catching passes as well. So over 126.5 rushing plus receiving yards for Jaden Ott. I am all about Jaden Ott this time. Really like him. And then they have a bunch of combo rushing props. There's one here, George Holani and Taj Brooks. It's 196.5. I like the under, but not because I think Taj is going to struggle. It's just I don't know how many yardage that Holani will actually get, and I think it'll be a situation in which like Brooks rushes for 125 to 150 and Holani's below 60 or 50. So I'm taking the under 196.5 rushing yards combo. I could see that number dipping down even further by the time the game starts. So those are my primary prize picks at the moment. And it's a very efficient show that we've done. So we'll get into the slate breakers portion and then we'll be all set as we get into it. Now, next week, there's going to be, a small bowl game, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There will be daily coverage of those. And then there will be another show next week on Thursday covering the set of games that's on Saturday. So still a little bit more to go, but just rest assured there will be written coverage of each and every bowl game to get you set up there. And we'll still be active in the Discord as well, which is active every day, even though there's not slates with us talking about the transfer portal. All right. Slate breakers, who you got? What are they going to score?
All right, so feel like I think going to Sherrod or Taj Brooks is a little bit too obvious. We want to be a little bit more interesting than that with the slate breakers. I am going to go Logan Loya, 8 catches for 137 yards and a touchdown.
Love it. Logan Loya on the case. I'm going to be having to roster him for sure. Appreciate it, as always, everyone who's continued to support the show throughout the season. Let's start bowl season off with a bang. Make sure that you're on FTNdaily.com and in the FTN CFB DFS Discord. You are not going to want to have any lock come up without at least checking to make sure, because even though as of now we have a fairly strong handle on all of the news, there is going to be stuff that happens the morning of, and there will even be times where a player who suited up, warmed up, dressed out, as they say, ends up not playing at all. So be prepared for any and all scenarios there with the bowl games. Thanks, Jake. Thanks to all of you. We'll see you guys next week for another episode of the CFB Super Show. And as we get into playoffs season as well, we got to say, go Huskies. Whoop, whoop. They got the Purple Rain hashtag and everything.